this for years, for decades.
Today, I want to take you to a dinner party.
But not a fun one.
Definitely not a fun one. Imagine a very long table, white linen, in a guarded room in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's December 1st, 2018.
Right. The G20 summit had just wrapped up, but for the global economy, this dinner was really the only event that mattered.
And who's at the table?
You've got the American delegation on one side, led by President Donald Trump, and on the other, the Chinese delegation, led by President Xi Jinping.
And the menu is what? Grilled sirloin and just incredibly high tension?
Exactly.
So Trump comes out of this meeting beaming. He calls it amazing and productive. They announce a truce, a 90-day pause. But looking at the stack of research we have today, including a really dense Harvard Business School case study, calling it a truce feels a bit optimistic, doesn't it?
It does. It was less of a peace treaty and more of a momentary ceasefire in a war that had been brewing for decades.
A ceasefire.
Yeah. At that exact moment, the U.S. was poised to hike tariffs from 10% to 25% on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods.
$200 billion, that's just an astronomical number.
It is.
So our mission today is to figure out how we ended up at that table, because this didn't start with Trump. We need to unpack how these two economies went from a kind of honeymoon phase in the 70s to accusing each other of theft, espionage, and economic aggression. It's like watching a bad divorce, but the couple owns the entire global economy.
That is actually a perfect metaphor. You have the courtship, the marriage of convenience, and then the very messy custody battle over global wealth.
And both sides have a totally different story.
Oh, completely different versions of why the marriage failed.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with the courtship, because it's easy to forget now, but for a long time, the US and China were essentially trying to be best friends.
It started in 1972. President Richard Nixon makes that famous surprise trip to Beijing. He called it a journey of peace.
And at that time, trade between the US and China was basically zero, right?
Nothing. They were a completely closed-off communist state.
But the real shift, the moment the engine turns on, is 1978. That's when Deng Xiaoping takes over.
Right, and he says something that I think is one of the most important quotes in modern economic history.
The cat quote.
It doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice.
I love that. It's so dismissive of ideology. He's basically saying, I don't care if it's communism or capitalism. If it works, if it feeds people, do it.
Pure pragmatism. He looked at the chaos of the Cultural Revolution and just realized they needed to eat.
So he opened up these special economic zones.
He did. He basically drew circles on the map, places like Shenzhen, and said, in here, the old rules don't apply. Come build factories, make money.
And the plan was to copy the playbook of countries like Japan and Singapore, right?
Yeah.
Export your way to prosperity.
Exactly. And the U.S. was more than happy to help. We provided the market, we bought the t-shirts, the sneakers, the plastic toys.
And in return, we got low inflation. Cheap goods at Walmart kept American consumers happy for a long time.
But somewhere along the line, the deal changed. They didn't just stay in the t-shirt business.
No.
And that's the crux of the friction. The turning point is really 2001 when China joins the World Trade Organization, the WTO.
That opened the floodgates.
It did. But more importantly, China moved up the value chain. They started making computer chips, jet engine parts, telecom equipment.
And that leads to this global imbalances problem mentioned in the sources. Because while they were selling us all this high-tech stuff, they weren't buying enough from us to balance the books.
The trade deficit just exploded.
Yeah.
By 2008, the U.S. deficit with China was nearly half of our total deficit with the entire world.
Wow.
But here's the kicker. China didn't just sit on that cash. They took the dollars they earned and loaned them right back to the U.S. government.
They bought our debt.
Massive amounts of it. By 2018, China was the largest foreign creditor to the U.S. So we were in this weird position where our biggest economic rival was also our banker.
Which brings us to 2016 and Donald Trump. He didn't invent the anger about this, but he certainly turned the volume up to 11.
Absolutely.
And he had this very specific list of grievances. I want to go through these one by one because some of them seem valid and some, well, let's see.
Let's do it.
Grievance number 1, currency manipulation. He talked about this
A little
concept.
constantly.
The idea that China was artificially making their money, the renminbi cheaper, to sell more exports. He called them the grand chess masters of devaluation.
This is a fascinating one because it's
Yeah.
a perfect example of a political talking point that outlived the economic reality.
What do you mean?
Well, if you were looking at data from the 1990s or early 2000s, he was right. China absolutely suppressed its currency.
But he was saying this in 2016.
Right. And by then, if you look at the data in our source stack for the decade before the trade war, say 2005 to 2015, the renminbi actually appreciated.
It went up.
It gained about 25% against the dollar. The IMF even looked at this and said the currency was broadly in line with fundamentals.
So by the time the war started, they were doing the opposite of what he accused them of.
Effectively, yes. In fact, around 2015, China was burning through its reserves to keep its currency up, not down, to stop capital from fleeing the country.
So yelling at someone for speeding when they're stopped at a red light.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so accusation 1 is shaky on the timing. Let's look at number 2. Manufacturing jobs. This is the emotional core, the American carnage speech.
This one has much firmer ground to stand on. There's a famous study by the economist David Otter called the China Shock.
I saw that in the notes. It sounds like a horror movie.
For many communities, it was. Otter calculated that between 2001, when China joined the WTO, in 2007, about 40% of the decline in U.S. manufacturing jobs was directly attributable to Chinese import competition.
40%. That is a staggering statistic.
It is. When you suddenly introduce a massive labor force willing to work for a fraction of the cost, factories in high-wage countries close. That's just math.
But again, nuance. By 2018, was a trade war the right tool to fix that?
Well, that's the question, because those jobs had been gone for 10 years at that point.
And the world had changed.
Exactly. Wages in China had gone up. But the bigger factor is automation. If you use tariffs to force a factory to move back to Ohio, it doesn't bring back 1,000 jobs for guys with wrenches.
It brings back a factory full of robots.
And maybe 10 engineers to run them. So Trump was correctly diagnosing the wound, the pain of job loss, but maybe prescribing a medicine that couldn't really cure it.
But then we get to accusation number 3. And this is the one that really unified everyone. Republicans, Democrats, the business community.
Intellectual property theft.
The IP issue. Explain how this worked in practice, because it wasn't just like simple theft, it was written into the contracts, right?
It was institutionalized. It's called forced technology transfer.
Okay.
Let's say you're a big American car company. You see China and its 1.4 billion potential customers. You are desperate to get in.
Of course. Biggest market in the world.
But the Chinese government says, okay, you can come in, but you have to form a joint venture with a Chinese company, and you have to teach them how to make your product.
It's the price of admission. You hand over the blueprints to get access to the customers.
Precisely. And the U.S. grievance was that China was taking this technology and using it to fuel Made in China 2025.
Right. Xi Jinping's big plan.
His state-led initiative to dominate the future of tech. Aerospace, robotics, electric vehicles, the stuff of the future.
So the fear wasn't just about losing money today. It was about creating a competitor that would crush you tomorrow.
Exactly. You add in the allegations of cyber espionage hacking corporate servers and the focus on Huawei as a national security threat. By 2018, the U.S. establishment had decided China wasn't a partner anymore,
They were a predator.
a strategic predator.
So the pot is boiling. Let's walk through the actual explosion, because it didn't happen all at once. It started with washing machines.
It did. January 2018, Trump fires the first shot. Safeguard tariffs on imported washing machines and solar panels.
Why washing machines, of all things?
It was a tangible domestic industry that had been complaining about cheap imports. It was a signal. The old rules are out the window.
But the real shock was March 2018 with the Section 232 tariffs.
That was the big one. Section 232 is an old, obscure law that lets the president block imports if they threaten national security.
And he used this for steel and aluminum?
25% on steel, 10% on aluminum. But the controversy wasn't just the tax. It was who he hit.
He didn't just hit China.
No, he hit Canada, Mexico, the European Union. He essentially told our closest allies, your steel is a threat to the United States.
Which seems like a strange strategy. If you're about to get into a heavyweight fight with China, don't you want your friends in your corner?
Most strategists would say yes. Instead, he started a trade war on multiple fronts. But by the summer of 2018, the guns turned specifically to Beijing.
The main event.
Yep. July 2018, tariffs on $34 billion of Chinese goods. China hits back immediately, dollar for dollar. Then September hits, and the U.S. escalates to $200 billion.
And this is where the math gets really interesting.
This is where China hit a wall.
A volume war.
A volume wall. In 2017, China only imported about $130 billion worth of goods from the U.S. in total.
Ah.
The U.S. imported over $500 billion from China. So when Trump went to $200 billion, China literally ran out of American products to tax.
They couldn't go dollar for dollar anymore.
No. So they had to get creative. Asymmetric warfare. They looked at the U.S. political map and asked, where does it hurt Trump the most?
And the answer was the Farm Bill.
Soybeans. It was a precision strike. The U.S. exports billions of dollars of soybeans, and 57% of them went to China.
Wow.
So they slapped a massive tariff on them, knowing it would cause maximum pain in states that voted for Trump.
So let's talk about that pain. Trump tweeted that trade wars are good and easy to win. Looking at the fallout, was it easy?
It depends on who you ask. If you were a consumer or a farmer, it was brutal.
Let's go back to the washing machines. Did the tariffs actually make them more expensive?
Immediately. The price of laundry equipment in the U.S. jumped 17% in just 3 months. The biggest spike in 40 years.
And here's the crazy part.
Yeah.
Domestic manufacturers raised their prices too.
They did. The companies the tariffs were supposed to protect.
Because they could.
Because they could. If your foreign competitor is forced to be more expensive, you can raise your prices and still be the cheaper option. The consumer pays the bill either way.
And the farmers.
Devastation. Soybean exports to China collapsed, down 62%. Silos were bursting.
I remember seeing pictures of that.
Yeah. And the U.S. government had to create a massive welfare program, pledging $12 billion in subsidies to bail them out.
This brings up that concept, trade diversion. The idea that trade is like water. If you block it one place, it leaks out somewhere else.
That's it. Chinese pigs still need to eat. So if China isn't buying soybeans from Iowa, where do they go?
Brazil, Argentina.
Exactly. Those countries saw a massive windfall. We essentially just handed market share to our South American competitors. And once you lose those supply chains, it is very hard to get them back.
So we hurt our consumers, we hurt our farmers. Did we at least hurt China? Did the pressure work?
Oh, we definitely inflicted pain. China's stock market dropped. Their economic growth slowed to 6.6%, their lowest since 1990. Unemployment ticked up.
So why didn't they just fold? The media kept asking if Beijing would blink first.
Because the political systems are totally different. That's the key variable. In the U.S., if the stock market tanks 20%, which it did in late 2018, voters get angry and the president sweats about re-election.
And Xi Jinping doesn't have that problem.
No, he controls the media, the banks, the courts. He can absorb economic pain and suppress dissent in a way a democratic leader simply can't. It became a contest of pain tolerance.
Okay, so amidst all this chaos, the Trump administration did try to clean up the mess with the allies. We have to talk about the USMCA, the new NAFTA.
This was the America First strategy in action. Trump hated NAFTA. He wanted to rewrite the rules to accomplish two things: stop outsourcing to Mexico and unite the continent against China.
There's one clause in there I found really clever, the wage clause.
It is a fascinating piece of policy engineering. The deal requires that 40 to 45% of a car's content must be made by workers earning at least $16 an hour.
And I'm guessing the average Mexican auto worker was not making $16 an hour.
Not even close. A fraction of that. So this rule effectively neutralizes the cheap labor advantage. If you have to pay $16 an hour in Mexico, you might as well just keep the factory in Michigan.
It's an anti-outsourcing force field.
That's a good way to think about it. And they added a sunset clause. The whole deal expires after 16 years unless it's renewed. That keeps everyone on their toes.
So zoom out for me. We have the USMCA signed. We have expensive washing machines, farmers on subsidies, and that dinner in Buenos Aires where they called a truce. Where does this leave us as of early 2019?
It leaves us in a cold peace. The truce was in place, but the tariffs were all still there. The structural issues, the IP theft, the state subsidies, none of that was solved.
Trump tweeted around this time, "I am a tariff man." It sounded like he was digging in for a long siege.
And that is the fundamental shift. The consensus in our sources is that this stopped being about just economics. It wasn't about you buy my soybeans, I buy your toaster anymore.
What did it become?
A structural conflict, a clash of systems. The U.S. market-driven model versus China's state-led model. The U.S. stopped viewing China as a customer and started viewing them as a rival.
And that struggle raises a really uncomfortable question. The Economist pointed this out, and it's something I've been thinking about this whole time.
The question of the end game. Let's say the US wins. Let's say the tariffs work perfectly and supply chains leave China and come back to America. Who actually gets those jobs?
Right. It's not the 1970s anymore. We don't have assembly lines with thousands of people.
Exactly. A factory that opens in Ohio today is highly automated. It's robots, it's software, and a handful of skilled technicians.
So we might be disrupting the global economy, paying higher prices, and alienating allies, all to bring back manufacturing, but the jobs aren't really coming with it.
That's the risk. We're fighting a 20th century trade war in a 21st century automated economy.
And that disconnect is why this moment in history, from Nixon's toast to Trump's tariffs, is so critical to understand. It shaped the world we are living in right now. Well, on that sobering but necessary note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. We've gone from Buenos Aires to the soybean fields of Iowa. It's a complex story, and we're just seeing the middle chapters play out. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.